Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. We are continuing our reading of Iqbal's Reconstruction of Religious Thought in Islam, and we had stopped here. And today we are just going to start from here in its deeper movement. Here, in its deeper movement, however, thought is capable of reaching an immanent infinite in whose self-unfolding movement, the various finite concepts are merely moments. One thing to note is that he's using thought here now as he is hypostatizing thought in a sense. Hypostatization of thought means that treating thought as something which exists on, which is self-subsisting. In our normal understanding, thought is something which is a function of something which self-subsists. So we don't think that thought can self-subsist. But in Hegelian ontology, thought is something which can subsist. And Iqbal is going with Hegel in this as well. So thought is a world spirit or something like that. So in its deeper movement, however, thought is capable of reaching an immanent infinite. Actually, it might be here, he might mean our thought or particular thought. Let's see. In its deeper movement, however, thought is capable of reaching an immanent infinite in whose self-unfolding movement the various finite concepts are merely moments. Meaning that particular thoughts are part and parcel of thought as the world spirit or thought as an infinite or as a whole, and that follows from Hegel's conception of genuine infinity, as we saw previously. As we saw for Hegel, infinite or finite can't be, or true infinite can't be outside or separate from finite. So finite can't be outside infinite, because if finite is outside infinite, then infinite is not infinite. It is being limited or restricted by something outside itself. And as we saw, the only logical solution to this for Hegel is to claim that finite is part and parcel infinite. So as individual beings, we might think of ourselves as finite, separated from and separate from infinite, but in reality our thought is a moment within the world historical march of infinite thought. And I guess it's a form of false consciousness to think that according to Hegel, and I guess Iqbal as well, to think that we as our individual thoughts are separate from our individual thoughts are separate from thought in general. In fact, they are part and parcel of this thought, which is the true infinite in the sense that it's true infinite in the sense that true infinite contains all finite thoughts within it as its moments. Or one way to look at is to see the true infinite as potential, and individual thoughts or finite thought as actualization of this true infinite in different ways. Okay, so let's go back. So in its deeper movement, our thought is capable of reaching an immanent infinite in whose self-unfolding movement the various infinite concepts are merely moments. I guess some sort of particular or individual thoughts, let's say philosophical thought or reflective thought, is able to this individual thought is part of finite concepts, which are moments of this immanent infinite. And this infinite is immanent in the sense that it is not separate from its manifestations, although it is not consumed by its individual manifestation either. So in a sense there is always a transcendence, but that transcendence would be immanent transcendence, or at least separate from traditional concept of transcendence, where transcendent is separate from finite. Okay, so in its deeper movement, our thought is capable of reaching an immanent infinite. So particular thought in a self-reflective philosophical moments are able to retrace the movement of this infinite, which is an immanent movement, and it can do because there's no basic or fundamental opposition between finite and infinite. And finite, one aspect of finite is finitude, but other aspect is infinitude or infinity. So I guess when particular thought is through immanent transcendence rises above its finitude and traces the moment of infinite, it is able to penetrate the infinite. So as he would say, those people are wrong. Kant or Ghazali, for example, in his view, Iqbal's view, who claim that finite thought cannot reach infinite. But as far as Ghazali is concerned, when he's talking about finite thought, he's talking about infinite. He's talking about God. But I'm not sure whether Iqbal is talking about God here. If he were, I mean, that would be clear blasphemy. But Hegel is talking about God. Immanent infinite is God for Hegel, but I don't think it is for Iqbal. So this contrast with Ghazali and to a certain extent to Kant as well is misleading in that sense. Okay, so in its deeper, let's see how much. In its deeper movement, however, thought is capable of reaching an immanent infinite in a self-unfolding movement. The various finite concepts are merely moments. Okay. In its essential nature, then thought is not static. Then, what does then saying here? The transition is not clear, but what he is saying, it in its essential nature, then thought is not static. So it is dynamic. So that's again Hegelian, and for this its internal infinite in its internal infinitude in time, like the seed which from very beginning carries within itself organic unity of the tree as a present fact. So that the mention of potential and actual a moment ago becomes relevant here. Okay. So when Hegel criticized what he called bad infinity, the concept of bad infinity, which treats infinity as a never-ending sequence or pure limitlessness. He did so because for him, if this is the case, then the gulf between finite, which is limited, and infinite, which is limitless, cannot be breached. That was but more than that, this is a contradictory concept according to Hegel, because if infinity is limitless and if finite is outside infinity, then infinity is actually limited by finite. So he come up with what he called true infinity, and true infinity is not limitlessness. true infinity is actually the whole. And this whole is infinite in the sense that there's nothing outside it. It is a closed system. But that doesn't mean that it goes forever. Okay. So in a sense, it is, in our conception, it is limited, but it is not limited by anything else. It is limited in the sense that it is a whole. And that reminds us of Aristotle as well, because for Aristotle, although time is infinite in the sense that it goes forever, the universe itself is limited or finite. So in a sense, Hegel here is very close to Aristotle, but he is close to Aristotle in another sense, in which this true infinite, which is a whole, and finite, whatever is within this infinite. But how the relationship between this finite and infinite is one of potential versus actual. And this is very Aristotelian as well, because potentiality, actuality are very important Aristotelian concepts. So infinite is potential. So finite is in fact manifestation of this infinite, which is potential. So in a sense, infinite is, want to define infinite according to Hegel and Iqbal, infinite would be so infinite is actually potentiality plus all finite manifestation. So infinite actually is nothing apart from this. So this is infinite only in the sense that it is potential and the whole potential, which is slowly manifesting itself in different actualities. So different individualities, different civilizations, different endeavors, they are all the manifestation of the basic fundamental potential, which is the whole, in the sense that there's nothing else, not in the sense that it is limitless. So, and that's why that if this is clear, then we can understand Iqbal's remarks about essential nature of thought clearly. So, as I say, in its deeper movement, how thought is capable of reaching an immanent infinite, in whose self-unfolding movement the various finite concepts are merely moments. In its essential nature, then, thought is not static. Now, it's not static because this thought is a potential. and as a potential it needs to be realized. Okay, and it is realized in its movement, unfolds its internal infinitude, that is its internal potential, the whole in time, like the seed which from the very beginning carries within itself the organic unity of tree as a present fact. So it means that we can think of thought or whatever is infinite, which we will find out is actually a thought, at least for Hegel, or world spirit, or whatever you want to call it. It is infinite only in the sense that it is a seed in which every possibility is already there. But that possibility actualizes itself in a serial time, in 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 sequences. So, and that's where finitude comes from, because the whole doesn't manifest itself at once until it's actualized itself as a tree, for example, and then that movement will stop. Okay, so that's the story. So in its essential nature, thought is not static. It's dynamic. It's not static. Why? Because this is potential. And the movement is that's what history is. The movement is what turns this potential into actuality over time, in the same way in which seed becomes tree. So in a sense, seed is the infinite potential, if that's all it is, and this time that's the history. And once the tree is there, then the history ends and we have the actuality. The whole become actual, from potential to actual. And these finite moments from seed to tree, they are all part and parcel of infinite, in the sense that they're already there in the potential. So that's the picture, that's the Hegelian picture. And here again Aristotle comes. For Aristotle, because in Aristotle, movement is, in a sense, is a lack or privation. And that's why, for example, his God, is what he calls God, doesn't move at all, because that would be a lack, and God cannot have any defect. And there's a movement precisely because in Aristotle things are not perfect, things of this world. And in a sense, what moves them is the longing for perfection, and that perfection is what God is for Aristotle and his different followers. Now, Hegel sort of inherit that concept, but that concept, but he obviously retains some of the Aristotelian stuff, but some of the stuff he transforms. So movement is, so if potential is God for Hegel, that means it's in a sense departure from Aristotelian tradition, because for Aristotle potential cannot be God. God is pure actuality. But for Hegel, God is potential in process of becoming actual. So in a twisted way, he keeps Aristotelian picture in the sense that although God is a potential, but it's a potential which is in the process of, so the motion is there, movement is there, becoming actual, which is perfection or actuality. So in a sense, God here is just a potential God, and here God would be the actual God. So movement in a sense is a lack here as well for Hegel. Anyway, so I think we should stop here and we'll just pick up it again. So let's go back to the text and finish it off there. Okay, so in its deeper where did it go? In its deeper movement, thought, how a thought is capable of reaching an immanent infinite in its deeper movement, however, thought is capable of reaching an immanent infinite in whose self-unfolding movement the various finite concepts are merely moments. In its essential nature, then, thought is not static. So thought is not static. It is dynamic and unfolds internal infinitude in time, like the seed which from the very beginning carries within itself the organic unity of the tree as a present fact. So thought is not static, it's an emotion, but it's an emotion to become actual. So in a sense, when it's fully actual, it will be static again. So in a sense, the Aristotelian bias towards the static towards the stationary is still there, but in a more twisted way. Anyway, we still need a bit more work on these. So we'll pick these two sentences again and then we'll continue from there. Okay, thank you.